Hi, this is Michael Christopher. I wrote Tupac Behind Bars. Just wanted to clarify that in 1995, Tupac Shakur would have known me as C.O. Blaze. He did an interview in 1995 with Chuck Phillips. He mentioned me by name. I hope this helps. Please, I hope you enjoy my exclusive interview with The Art of Dialogue. Thanks.
So that made me feel good. You know, that was like that was the only revenge I really wanted.
Did you get a lot of support in jail? What was people like in jail?
I got support from all the inmates. Nobody to my face never said nothing wrong. Everybody gave me my props. From one CO Blaze, he gave me respect. So much respect they was about to fire him. He just treated me nice, with respect. Everybody else was mad because I made more money than the warden.
Welcome to the Art of Dialogue. We have a very special guest, very hard to get in touch with. Been trying to get with this guy for over a year. We have author Michael Christopher, former Clinton Correctional Facility CO. Very pleased to have you. Thank you for coming through, and I appreciate you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Michael, before we get into anything else, I want to start right here with this photo. This isn't just a random snapshot. This is Tupac inside Clinton Correctional Facility, standing in front of the backdrop they use for visitation photos. And what makes this picture so important is the message that he wrote on it. See you at the crossroads, West Coast all the way. To a good man, I wish you all the success in the world and all the good luck on the book. Until next time. Michael, this is signed by Tupac himself, handwritten, and you're the person he gave it to. That right there sets the tone for this conversation that we're about to have, because it shows the audience you weren't just a visitor, a fan, or someone watching from the outside. You were right next to this man inside Clinton. He trusted you enough to write this message and to speak life into you. What do you remember about the day this picture was taken, and how did it happen?
I really don't know much about the day it was taken. All I know is that I received it after he left, and I had recognized where it was from because I had seen that same backdrop for several years, so I knew exactly where the picture was taken from. I believe he probably sent me that particular picture, kind of like proof that it was while he was incarcerated there.
Why do you think Tupac wrote this specific message to you? All the success in the world, good luck on the book. What book was he referring to at the time?
Well, he knew that I like to write, and he wrote all the time. And we had discussions about perhaps someday that I would write a book. And I had told him, do you think people would read it? And he said, write about something you know. He said, write about prison. And I said, well, maybe I'll write about you. And he goes, well, yeah, that's cool. But just keep it real. If you're going to do it, make sure what you say is real, And I said, I try to do that. I said, I'll think about it, And he goes, well, if you're going to do it, you're going to need a hook. I said, a hook? And he goes, yeah, you need a hook to sell a book. And I said, oh. And he goes, well, I'm going to write books, and I got famous people that are going to support me. They might write things on the jacket and say how good the book is, and that will help me sell my books. And he goes, you need something like that. And I said, I don't know anybody. And he goes, man, I'm sure you know somebody. I go, nah. I said, but I'll take that in consideration. Thanks. So when I did get the picture, it seemed to me that he was supplying me with a hook. That was the only thing I could think of, was that here's a guy that took the time to say those things about conversations we had, and that if I did write the book, that would provide me with some type of proof. that we actually had those conversations. So when I received it, it touched me. It did, because he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do anything. He didn't owe me anything. I didn't owe him anything. We just had a good rapport. I liked him. I believe he liked me. And, I'm glad that I was able to meet him, and that, I was there for the time that he was there. So
the phrase, see you at the crossroads, is powerful. What did Tupac mean by that when he wrote that to you?
Well, the day that Suge Knight came with David Kennard to have him sign the contract with Death Row, they they were sitting at the table, and I remember that Tupac had signed the contract, and he came over to my desk, which he did quite often. He would get up from his visiting room table and come over and talk to me, even though his visitors were at the table. And he showed me the contract because he was pretty proud of it. And he goes, "Do you know what this is?" And I'm like, "Nah." And he's like, "I just signed a contract with Death Row, and that's Suge Knight, and blah, blah, blah." And he goes, "I'm going to get the money for my bail." And I said, "Cool." And I said, that's cool. So he went back to his visit room table, and the visit ended. And at the end of the visit, I remember him coming up to the desk again, because at the end of the visits, the other inmates would be strip frisked first. He would be the last one. So he would stand by me the entire time while they were, each being called for the next person to go. So it would take, some time, 20 minutes, sometimes a half hour, depending on how many visits. And we were talking, and I said, "Wow, it looks like you're going to be in the money again." Because I knew that being in prison had financially strained him somewhat. He had told me, he's going through a lot of money. And I said, "Well, it looks like you're back in business." And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Just be careful, because you might have sold your soul to the devil." And he kind of laughed, and he goes, "Oh, you mean like Robert Johnson, right?" And at the Crossroads. And I go, "Yep." And I go, "Just be careful, because he might, the devil might call in his chips." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm good. So I believe that he was referencing that, because we both laughed about that. He thought it was kind of funny that I had made that inference, and he was quite familiar with Robert Johnson already anyway. So he was like, "Damn." He says, "Yeah." He says, "I guess maybe." But he said he wasn't worried. He said, I don't care if I signed a soul with the devil, as long as the devil can get me out of here. I don't care who I sign with." So he was laughing about that. And I believe that's what he was referencing in the picture.
For the people who don't know who Robert Johnson is, explain to them a little bit about that.
Well, Robert Johnson was a famous blues player. Apparently, so I guess you'd say the legend goes, that he wasn't that good of a musician playing the blues when he first started. And then he left town for a while. And then I think it was like a year or so later, he came back to town, and he all of a sudden could play like nobody else. I mean, the guy was like phenomenal, and nobody could figure out why. So the legend goes that at the Crossroads, he had made some kind of deal or a pact with the devil, and the devil had told him that he would give him like talent beyond belief that would be like world renowned, but in return, he would owe him. And so, as far as I know, the legend pretty much goes that he did become famous, and he was probably at that time the best blues player, and maybe still is. But the devil cashed it in, and eventually he had died young. And I was just, concerned with Tupac about the same kind of parallel.
When you look at this photo today, knowing everything that happened shortly after, what goes through your mind?
Well, I kind of think that maybe things would have turned out different had it been different. Had he not signed, I mean, his association was partially responsible, I think, for his untimely death. Um, had he been with a different label, had he not been there, I mean, you can say that all day long, but Tupac and I always used to talk about uh, destiny, fate, things happening when they're supposed to. Uh, and even if a few conversations he and I would have would be like about precognition, knowing things before they happen. He said he had that before, and I told him that I had. And we agreed that even if, say, because we're firm believers in God, we said even if God gives you that insight into what's going to happen, it's just to give you that calmness that you already know the outcome. You know what I mean? It's like he and I both agreed that even if you could peer into the future, you couldn't change it, no matter how much you wanted to. And I believe that in some way he knew that his time on Earth would probably be short, uh, and that because of that, I think that's why he tried to work so tirelessly. You know what I mean? He tried to pack in 25 hours into a 24-hour day. The guy was like, he was always thinking, always, we were always talking about something. And I think that everything we talked about registered with him, so that his creative side when he wrote could be a conversation he had with somebody a year ago or whatever, 6 months ago. He was always picking little pieces, little things that he found interesting or fascinating, or you know what I mean? He was using everything. Uh, so I know that he and I had talked about Bruce Lee. He liked Bruce Lee, and I like Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee was one of those guys, according to what I've read, that he was the same type of person. He squeezed everything into a day. He didn't want to waste a minute. This guy was like, we only have so many minutes on the earth. Don't waste one of them. So always be doing, thinking. And I think Tupac practiced that philosophy as well.
For the people watching who may not understand how close you and Tupac were inside of the maximum security prison, Clinton, what does this photograph and message say about your relationship with him?
Well, I feel that it solidifies the idea that a correction officer and an inmate could actually could not only like each other but have respect for each other, not just because of like my authority over him. Just the shirt that I wore, the color would signify to an inmate that a certain amount of respect was expected. And but I believe that Tupac gave it freely, and that he wasn't giving me respect because he had to. He was giving me respect because he wanted to. And I believe that I gave it back freely to him because I felt that he earned it. That my philosophy was, I treat you the way you treat me. And if you treat me with respect, I treat you with respect. And it doesn't matter who you are. It didn't matter what inmate it was. It wasn't just Tupac. It was just inmates in general. I mean, I tried to treat everybody the way, if I were there, I would want to be treated, like a human being first. I still expected them to follow the rules. Even any inmate that ever knew me could tell you I was not soft, but I was firm, but I was fair. I gave every person what they were entitled to, what they were supposed to get, and I treated them with respect. If I saw someone in the morning, I'd say good morning. I gave them common courtesies, that maybe not everybody does, but it's part of who I was.
Let's start from the beginning. March 8th, 1995. When you first met Tupac at Clinton, officers openly used the N-word. Uh, when do you think, or should I say, why do you think that was tolerated in New York state prisons in the mid-90s?
Well, I don't think it's ever tolerated by New York State. However, being honest, it did occur at Clinton. Um, I don't think it was an open thing. I think that some of the officers had that mentality. Um, I'm not sure if it was upbringing. I'm not really sure. I was never raised that way, so it never affected me in that way. I always treated everybody the same. I don't see colors. I see people, personalities. I see the way they treat me, I treat them. Um, but, however, occasionally, like that particular day you're talking about, when Tupac arrived, uh, there was an officer in particular that did make that comment to him when he looked down the gallery, or the hallway, excuse me. He looked down the hallway, and somebody had asked, where is that guy, that rapper guy, the movie star, and another officer pointed down the hallway where they were all lined up, and he said, there he is right there. And then he made the remark to the effect that, just another poor dumb N word with the ER, excuse me, not the A. And he said that, they laughed. I didn't laugh. I mean, I didn't find it funny. I looked to see who they were talking about. I didn't know who Tupac was. I really didn't. I'd never heard of him. I didn't know anything about him. But that changed, rather quickly. Within days, actually, after he got there, I started to get to know him, and I pretty much liked him right away after we had our first little encounter. But the first time that I actually talked to him, he was distant. He gave me that blank look, where kind of like looking through me, not at me, and I was escorting him back after a visit, and I stopped him in the hallway and I said, "Do you have a problem with me?" And I kind of got up in his face. Sometimes I've been known to do that if I have a problem with somebody, and I just wanted to make sure that we understood each other. And his response, at first was nothing, like a glaring stare. And I said, how do you have a problem with me? You don't even know me. I don't know you. I don't have a problem with you. And I was in prison. When you do something like that, you're not really sure how it's going to go, because sometimes if a person's violent, they leap. We call it, the term is froggy. Don't get froggy, because the guy, if you're in the guy's face, you're in his personal space, so anything can happen. And but Tupac didn't. He looked me up and down for a minute, and he thought about it, I'm sure. And then he must have thought that I was sincere, I guess, because he said, I don't have a problem with you. And he kind of smiled. And then from that point on, I don't think he ever stopped smiling whenever I spoke to him or was around him. He was always cordial. He was always articulate, smart, and I enjoyed conversating with him. He was all right. And at that moment, he introduced himself. I remember he says, I'm Tupac Shakur. And then he goes, oh, excuse me. And then he kind of deepened his voice, inmate Shakur. And he kind of like, at that moment, he gave me I think he was trying to give me like a little respect, like saying, okay, I'm giving you yours. I'm giving a prop to you that you're the officer, I'm the inmate. Okay, I know where I am. This is your house, that kind of thing, that kind of vibe. And he put his hand out to shake, and and I was like, okay. I figured, all right, I called him on it, so I owe him that much. I shook his hand. I did. And it was a different kind of handshake than I was used to. Um, he kind of gripped it, and then he pulled it back, and then he fist bumped it up and down, and he pulled it back, and then opened his hand, and it was different, but it was like cool, I was like, wow, it's all right. And he said, we're cool, and that was it. And I think the walls kind of came down at that moment, and I don't think they ever went back up.
You said you saw officers laughing after one called Tupac a dumb N-word. Why didn't you speak up at that moment?
I didn't speak up because the environment that I was in. I wasn't a very old guy either. I was a young guy. I'm surrounded by officers that, a lot of these guys are related, they're friends. It's a close-knit kind of group, but I'm sure we all have even family members that we don't always agree with. Just because somebody has an opinion doesn't mean it matches mine. But when it comes down to it, I would still have their back, if there was a problem. And I'm sure most family members would. I never engaged in that kind of stuff. But like I said, most of the guys there were decent people, and they didn't have that view. It was just a few. But I think in life, there are always a few people that feel that way, even if they don't openly say it.
You described Tupac as glaring at you with hate for white people. Do you think that perception was racial bias on your part, or justified suspicion on his part based on what had happened when he came to the prison and being called the N-word?
I think that was part of it, because I think, first of all, he had come from Rikers Island, and Rikers Island is a city jail where they hold over the inmate while they're waiting to be processed before they're sentenced, and then they ship them upstate to us, to the state facility. So they're never there very long. A few days, few weeks, not typically not that long, but long enough that whatever taste of prison he had at that moment was probably more than likely with officers that lived in the city. So I would say that there would be a bigger ratio of African American men working in the correctional facility. At Clinton, to my recollection, during the time he was there was one biracial officer. His father was white, his mother was African American, and he was a decent guy. He was a great guy. Great officer, everybody loved him. But I think that when Tupac was looking around, he's probably seeing, hey, everybody's white. To him, it felt like, okay, everybody's white, and now this guy just called me the N-word with the ER, And it wasn't in a good way. It was meant derogatory, and I think that it put him on notice that, he wasn't in Kansas anymore, right? So he was in a whole different world that he was used to, and the officers at Clinton weren't catering to him. And I'm not saying that Rikers did or didn't. I don't know. But I'm saying at Clinton, he wasn't getting that kind of attention. The officers looked at him as, as another inmate, and that's all he was. And because he came in with a sexual crime that he was convicted of, the officers looked at that again, not in a positive way. Not that they're supposed to look at it any different, but I think human nature dictates sometimes when you know the person's crime, or you think you do, it may change the way you act, or you may be a little bit more distant than you normally would be.
At what point did Tupac stop being inmate Shakur to you and start being a human being that you respected?
I think at the moment that he shook my hand, I started seeing him a little differently. At that moment, I think he had my curiosity up, because I was seeing that there was a different side to him, and I was interested in finding out more. I liked talking to him. He was a very intelligent guy, and I think that it just started there, but it continued throughout his entire time that he was there, that I appreciated more that he was not just an average inmate. The guy was different. And I think that sometimes you meet a person and you just click. And it doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor. Doesn't matter if you're white, black. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Sometimes you meet somebody, you just like them. And he was one of those guys. I met him. And after a few words and we started talking, I started to like the guy. I was like, okay, you know, I like him. Not as an inmate, but as a person. And I never gave him anything other than any other inmate would get. And I give him his props. He never asked for anything. And I just, you know, he always gave me respect, and I gave him back respect. And that's pretty much where we were at. I enjoyed talking to him. So, and I guess our conversations were amicable both ways. I think he liked it too, because it seemed like he always, when he was in a room, he always gravitated to me rather than the other inmates. He would come over to talk to me when he could have talked to them. But, you know, I was open to it, and I enjoyed his conversation, so I entertained it.
You wrote that most correctional officers wouldn't shake the hands with a black inmate. What did it cost you professionally to do it anyway?
Well, I mean, there were people that weren't crazy about it, of course, and maybe a lot of the guys didn't know that I shook his hand. Although it wasn't just one time. I mean, a lot of times when he would come in the visiting room, he would be the first one in to get his visit, so we'd have to wait for his visitor to arrive. It would just be him and I. And he would come in, and the first thing he'd do would shake my hand. And he'd say, "How you doing, Mr. C?" And I'd say, "Good, how are you, man? You good this morning?" "Yep, waiting for my visit." We'd start talking. I mean, I wasn't afraid to shake his hand, but if other officers had seen it, I'm sure they wouldn't have liked it. And they may have questioned it. Like, why are you doing that? Well, you know, I guess I didn't feel like it was inappropriate because it didn't go anywhere. It was just a handshake. To me, it was just like a good morning. You know what I mean? He was so used to it that he was treating me like somebody that he knew in the streets, and that he had just, you know, came across somebody that he liked and say, hey, and that was just part of who he was. So, you know, I allowed it. And he's not the only inmate that I've ever shook their hands. I've had people that have gotten ready to be released, and they would shake my hand, and they would say, you know, "Thank you for being a decent person." And I'd say, "Well, good luck," you know, and I would mean it. And I never saw any problem with that. It wasn't like an all the time thing, but there were occasions. I think that people that didn't know it, reading the book, probably would be like, that's crossing the line. That's too much. It was a different time in the 90s too, you know. It wasn't like today. It's a lot different in the prison system today than it was then. Back then, there were inmates at Clinton that had been there 30 and 40 years. And the officers got to know them. And I'm sure, I can almost say with certainty, there were other officers that had good rapport with inmates that they had known for so many years. If the person treated them decent, and there were some good officers that did their job, but no more. They didn't try to punish the inmate. Well, that's not our job. Our job wasn't to punish anybody. We were just to make sure that they didn't get out of the prison. They didn't escape. They did what they were told. They followed the rules. And that's pretty much it. Make sure they get what they're entitled to. No more, no less. And I think most inmates appreciated that if an officer followed consistency. You know, we called it firm, fair, and consistent. And if you acted the same every single day, they knew what to expect from you. And I think that, in return, you know, when they got ready to go home, they appreciated it, I think, and that's why I didn't have a problem. If a guy wanted to shake my hand, I'd shake his hand. I didn't care because I felt like he earned it. He did his time, and I'm not the judge. I didn't put him there. I don't release him. I don't have anything to do with it. But I don't hold it against him either.
Was the Department of Corrections more concerned about protecting Tupac or controlling the media narrative around his imprisonment, do you think?
Well, I think the state was concerned for their for themselves, that not only didn't they want the notoriety at the facility, they didn't want the media, what they would call a media circus, people coming in visiting all the time. I believe that's why they sent him to Clinton, the furthest max jail away from New York City. So it wasn't going to make it inaccessible, but it was going to make it harder for people to come visit. And I think, that was one of the reasons they didn't want him to be at risk. They didn't want anything to happen to him, because if something happened to him, the state would be liable. And I just think they were very concerned about that. They kept a very close eye on him. I was told, whenever we did visits, that he was to sit directly in front of me. Tupac used to laugh and call it police square one. Police, he'd say, that's the police square one. And he goes, that's where I sit. I go, yep, that's where you got to sit. Oh, man. I said, yep. It was right in front of me, maybe probably 4 feet in front of me. It was close. I mean, it was so close that I could hear their conversations with his guests, and his visitors. But, I think the state did that, of course, to protect themselves. I don't think they did it because they cared about Tupac so much as they cared about their own liability. You know what I mean? So, but I didn't mind. I mean, he was right there in front of me, and, I got to see who came to visit him. And a lot of times he would bring it to my desk, and they would have to check in, but he would get up from the table and introduce them to me and say, which was a step beyond what most inmates would ever do. Most guys wouldn't want any part of the CO. And this, Tupac always made it a point, like, he wanted me to know his people, his friends. And I didn't have a problem with that either,
From your account, Tupac was clearly intelligent and articulate. Why do you think so many prison staff still dismissed him as just another thug?
Well, probably because they didn't know him. I don't think they wanted to get to know him. I think a lot of times people have blinders on. If somebody accuses you of a crime, automatically they assume you're guilty, and they want to put a label on you. And I think that no matter how much you want to try to convince them otherwise, their minds are made up, And I've always been open-minded. I mean, I'm not saying I'm always right, but if I'm wrong and someone can prove that I'm wrong, I'll accept it. But and I think Tupac was like that too. I mean, you get something in your head, I'm gonna run with it, and he would too. But I think that he was the kind of guy that he wanted to be proven wrong sometime. You know what I mean? Like, show me why, or explain this to me, or he always wanted to know more. And that's the way I am, like things you don't understand, or things like that. It interested him, you know what I mean? And it interested me. Like, if you like something, then you pay attention to it. If you read a book and you really like the book, you might read it 2 times or 3 times, because that's what you do. You want to take it apart. You want to dissect it and find out what makes it tick. He was like that. At least he appeared that way to me when we talked.
You said Tupac reminded you of a teacher more than an inmate. Did that ever make you question who really belonged on which side of the bars?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. A lot of things Tupac did surprise me. Um, yeah, he was a teacher's aide in the pre-GED. He was helping inmates get ready to pass their general equivalencies, to get their GED diplomas. And he would be up at the chalkboard teaching, and he had told me he only had a 10th grade education. And I'm like, you're kidding. And he's like, nah, I never graduated. I'm like, you didn't? And he's like, nah. And I'm like, damn. And he goes, yeah. And then he told me about the school in Maryland that he went to for the arts and everything, but apparently he never completed, like his graduation, according to him. And I was surprised because talk to him, he was just, you could tell the conversation, he was intelligent, and he was articulate, and when he wanted to explain something, he could. I mean, he was up at the board teaching the inmates, and he had their attention. And I I would walk by the hallway, and they had the door has a big glass pane on it, so you can see inside, because the officers aren't inside the room, the classroom. But I'm in charge outside the classroom, and I have to make rounds and look in the rooms and make sure there's no problems between inmates or between the inmates and the civilians teacher, the staff. And I would see Tupac up there writing on the chalkboard, and the civilian staff would be sitting at his desk drinking coffee or whatever, doing other things, because Tupac was teaching the class. And I would walk by, and he would see me, and he would smile and stop, and give me the peace sign, and I'd give him the peace sign back, and I'd keep walking. But he was always like that, it surprised me, but it didn't surprise me, because after having conversations with him, I knew he could handle that, no problem. Uh, you know, there was other people there that had worked there. There was a college program, and one of the professors had told me, a diploma is not a measure of your worth. Just because you don't have a college degree doesn't mean you're not smart. That some of the smartest people the college professor had ever met didn't have degrees. And I think Tupac fit into that category. Just because he didn't have a college degree didn't mean that he wasn't smarter than guys that had a degree. So, that's how I felt about it. And I agreed with the professor. So
I think that's something exclusive here that we've never heard involving Tupac being in prison, from that perspective that he was actually teaching the other inmates and helping them to get their GED. I think that's very important information that you divulged. Like I said, the book is very interesting, and when I read it, I was like, wow, we need to interview this guy, And so you describe Tupac joking about his bullet wounds. Do you think that humor was a deflection, trauma, or part of his survival mask?
it probably was all three. I remember the day that we discussed it, it was during the strip frisk. And there's a lot of levity in prison, even though prison's a very serious place. Especially like a strip frisk, it's very invasive and very personal. And I had noticed the bullet wounds, and I said, "Oh man," and he goes, "Yeah, that's where I got shot." And I was like, "Damn," and he goes, "Yep," and he started showing me them, pointing to them, because sometimes he'd get really animated with like, I don't like that, and he pointed out like the first three, and then I thought you got shot 5 times, and then when we were talking, he had already stripped down, but he still had his undershorts on. Part of a strip frisk includes getting totally naked, and he still had his boxer shorts on, and I said, "I thought you got shot 5 times," and he goes, "Yeah, I got shot 5," and then he pulled down his shorts because that was the next step that I was going to tell him. I said, "Yeah, now remove your shorts," and he pointed down to his groin area and showed me the last two. And then he kind of starts giggling. And I'm like, okay, all right. And he goes, can you do me a favor? And I go, oh boy, here we go. I'm thinking to myself, this guy has never asked me for anything. And now he's going to ask me so. And I kind of give him that look. And he goes, no, no. He goes, I just want you to tell your homeboys that I have two nuts. And he started laughing. And then he started singing AC/DC, I have big balls. And he said, tell them I got two of them and they're big ones. And he started singing AC/DC. It was funny. And I started laughing, It's like, all right, I got you, man. I feel you. So it was humorous. And I think that when you were talking about like deflection, yeah, I guess, right? Because I mean, being shot, being naked in front of an officer, I mean, that's not the kind of things you want to do. He's forced into a position that is beyond his control. And I think that if I didn't have that kind of rapport with him, he never would have said that. But he felt like it, because we used to joke around quite a bit. And in prison, even the officers will joke around a lot. And sometimes they joke around with the inmates. It's not uncommon. I'm not sure about today. I've been retired for a while. But back in the 90s, rapports were different. Every officer was a little different. As long as you did your job, you could talk to an inmate. I mean, it was another human being, right? So I think that I think he was just trying to make the best out of a bad situation. It was a little bit embarrassing for him, I'm sure. I mean, who wouldn't be? I'd be embarrassed, right? You're a grown man in front of another man trying to prove that you don't have any contraband, before you go back to your cell. So, but then pointing out the gunshot wounds just solidified to me, that they were real. I mean, years later, I heard people say, oh, he never got shot. And I'm like, I saw him. He showed them to me. I know he got shot. I've seen gunshot wounds before in prison. You see them quite a bit. A lot of inmates have been shot. He's not the first person to be shot. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where it was at.
I think it was funny when he said, "Can you tell your homeboys?" Was it who he's talking about? The other prison guards?
I think so. Yeah, he had made something. He had said something to the effect that the other officers had called him one nut. Hey, one nut. Like I said, sometimes the other officers, they would play a little, and I'm not sure if they were playing with him in a mean way or if they were just playing because they knew it would get his goat. You know what I mean? Like inside the prison, if somebody knows they can press your buttons, they like to press them. And sometimes officers can do that. But even guys in the workplace, any place you work, even your homeboys, you're working with them and they know that something might bother you and they think it's funny, they'll keep bringing it up. And I think that they were doing that to him and laughing at his expense. I think he was starting to take it personal. And even though he didn't say he took it personal, when he said that, I kind of got that feeling that he wanted me to set it straight because he had showed it to me and said, look, I got them both. They're right here. I mean, that's part of it. You have to lift your testicles for the strip frisk. So obviously he had both of them. I would have known if he did.
You said that Tupac told you the streets were his family because he didn't have a father. Did you ever sense that Tupac was searching for a father figure even among prison staff?
I don't know about prison staff. I'm not really sure about that, but I do know that I got the sense that he always wanted a father. At least that's how I interpreted it. Like when he would talk to me, I could feel the emotion. Like a lot of times when Tupac and I would have conversations, he would say, have empathy. If you can have empathy, then you can get inside another person's head. You can understand what makes them tick. And I think he used that a lot when he wrote his songs and things like that nature, right? So when he spoke to me about not having a father, I felt it, you know, 'cause I kind of felt like it hurt him that he really wanted one, but he had accepted the fact that he didn't. So he told me that, you know, being in the streets, the people he hung out with, he considered them family. Like, not so much a father, but like a family. Uh, you know, he kind of said, you know what I mean? Like, because I was from up north, he says, right, you know, it's kind of like a rite of passage, you know, like you being a Boy Scout, right? Or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, okay. Because, right, because a lot of times up north, you know, when you're young, being a Boy Scout was what a lot of people did, you know what I mean? Maybe not in the city, but he was just making that comparison that when he was in the streets, that his growing up, he was learning on the streets, you know, how to be a man, something that should have been taught by his dad. You know what I mean?
Tupac admitted to you that his thug life tattoo didn't mean what the public thought. Do you believe Tupac was consciously manipulating his image for survival or for his legacy?
Uh, I'm not really sure. It's hard to say, right? I mean, he told me it wasn't what I thought it meant, right? The hate you give little infants, f's everyone, you know what I mean, that kind of thing. He was explaining it. I think he wanted me to think he wasn't a bad guy, you know, like I'm not who you think I am. I'm I'm uh, I'm not this thug that everybody thinks I am, and that I'm a bad person. I think he wanted me to understand that um, you could do things that people might consider bad and not be a bad person. You know what I mean? So I think that's where he was coming from.
You also mentioned in the book the rumors about Madonna and Salt and Pepper visiting Tupac. Do you think those rumors were racially charged fantasies among staff and inmates due to jealousy and the overall, you know, Madonna was a superstar, Salt and Pepper they were at the top of their game. How did you perceive that?
Uh, I'm not really sure. I mean, those were rumors that were swirling around that Madonna had came, which she didn't. Salt and Pepper had came, they didn't. Um, you know, I'm not really sure. A lot of times, you know, I would read like an article or something, and they might say, you know, it was rumored that Madonna visited or this or that, but I knew it wasn't true because I was there. Uh, I mean, I'm sure Tupac wished a lot of people had visited. I'm not sure that Madonna would have been one of them because they had broken it off, so he probably didn't care that she didn't come anyway. Probably better that she didn't, right? Because I mean, at the time, he was seeing Keisha. He had just started with who became his wife, Keisha Morris. So as far as Salt and Pepper, they never came. Um, there was a lot of people that could have came that didn't come, and I think he expressed to me that in a way that hurt him. Like he couldn't understand that if you were someone's friend, why you wouldn't want to come see him. You know what I mean? He felt like he had been slighted a little bit, and I think it bothered him.
Speaking of Madonna, there was a story that Tupac told you about Madonna. Uh, I think it's very interesting. Could you share that with the audience?
Yeah, he said that Madonna wasn't like you think. You know, he called her M, and I guess some of her friends do, I suppose. He said that, you know, they had slept together, and in the morning she woke him up, and I guess Pac wanted to sleep, you know, and she was like, Pac. And he's like, what, woman? What do you want? And she goes, I want to go for a jog. And he goes, I don't care. She goes, is it all, basically asking him if it was okay, you know? And he's like, I ain't your master. I don't care what you do. Go ahead. Do what you want to do, you know? And he was like, damn, man. He's like, he goes, it's not what you think. That perception that she is this dominant figure. He said in his experience, she was just the opposite. That she wanted his approval for everything, and he was like, the woman's got her own mind. Do what you want to do. You don't need my approval. And that's how he expressed it to me. And I don't know her, but that's just what he had said to me.
So he basically said that they had a night together, and when they woke up in the morning, basically she woke him up, and she wanted to go for a jog, and was just trying to get his approval, basically.
That's what it sounded like to me. Yeah.
Wow. When you said that Tupac said, "I ain't no thug though, Mr. C, I'm just like you," did you believe him, or was he trying to humanize himself in a dehumanizing situation?
I think that's pretty accurate. I mean, I think he wanted me to see him as a human being, not as an inmate. I think he wanted me not to see past the color of the uniform that they made. All inmates in New York State wear green. And I think he wanted me to see past the color of the green. You know what I mean? He wanted me to see the person inside. Basically, he was saying that he was seeing me beyond the color of my blue shirt, he was seeing me as a human, and I believe he wanted me to see him as a human. And I already did.
You seem to admire how Tupac made even the most hardened inmates laugh. Uh, did the prison officials or you ever fear that respect that the other inmates had for Tupac, or that he commanded, could turn into power over the guards?
Nah, I don't think that was ever an issue. Um, in APPU, the unit that he was in was a special unit. The inmates that were in there, a lot of them were high profile inmates themselves. They either, had crimes that were highly publicized, or they were inmates that were susceptible to be taken advantage of. So they didn't want them in population and having people take advantage of them. So I don't think that particular unit was ever really in jeopardy of him like taking a lot of power and utilizing it in that area. I think everybody basically saw him as another inmate. I mean, they knew he was a celebrity. Some of them, there were a few that wanted to try to be associated with him, and maybe even today still try to claim they were. But I don't really believe that it was ever an issue then. I think that they treated him like everybody else, They didn't like put him on a pedestal, which I think he kind of liked in a way, because maybe for once, he wasn't expected to be a certain way. He could be anybody he wanted to be. He could act any way he wanted to act. And there wasn't like a television crew capturing it. You know what I mean? So I believe that the Tupac I got to know was the real person. That he didn't need to impress me. I'm nobody. He was just being himself, and that's what I appreciated about him, is that he was just another person, And he told me that, he goes, celebrities are just people. He goes, don't be blinded by the hype, He said, and I've carried that the rest of my life with anyone I've ever met, even if they're a celebrity with fame. I look at them as just another person. That's it, because that's what he taught me.
You just described the APPU unit, where high profile inmates who might not survive in population. In your opinion, right? Uh, was Tupac locked away for his safety or to silence him?
Well, it's kind of funny, because when he first arrived at Clinton, he was in protective custody, and they put him there to keep him safe. Unfortunately, when you're in protective custody, you're locked in your cell 23 hours a day. You're out 1 hour for recreation. And that didn't sit well with Tupac. So what a lot of the inmates do, if they're able to, they arrange to have visits come, because that allows you to get out of your cell. You go up for the visit, you're there probably from 9 in the morning till 3 in the afternoon, usually were the standard hours. And you could do that. And Tupac, had a lot of people that came to visit him almost every day, not always at 9 o'clock. Like when he was in the school area, sometimes he'd get the call at 10 or 11. And that's when he would do the teaching and before he'd go on his visit. When they called him, then he would stop what he was doing and someone would come up and escort him from that area and down to the visit. But when he was in protective custody, I used to see him, as I said, on the weekends. Part of my duties was to take care of the visiting room, to watch over it by myself. I was the only officer in there. And we would get protective custody inmates and APPU inmates. And the first couple weeks he was there, he was in E block, which was protective custody. And after the visits, I would escort him back. That was part of my duties as well. So I'd get to talk to him. Clinton is a massive jail, by the way. It's huge. And it's connected by tunnels. And these, so that you never have to walk outside if you don't want to go from block to block. So the walk from the visiting room to where he was housed in E block was probably a 10-minute walk. It was quite lengthy. And we'd talk all the way. And after a few weeks, I said he was complaining about something in E block. I think he had just gotten locked up for dirty urine. And he goes, "Damn, they got me for dirty urine." And I go, "Dirty urine?" I said, "I thought we had a conversation about that when you first got here. You said you didn't smoke marijuana anymore." And he goes, "I don't." He goes, "Must be some other guy down the company. I don't know, man. Smoke, secondhand smoke." He started laughing. I said, "That was a good answer. I like that answer." And he goes, "Yeah, it was one of your guys that gave me the time for it, found me guilty," because they had a disciplinary system. An officer would write you up for an infraction, then you'd go before like a little court system almost. And then they would give you like sanctions, like, keep lock, where you're not allowed out of your cell. But he was in protective custody anyway. He couldn't come out anyhow. So I really didn't really take much from him. But I said to him, why are you in PC? Why aren't you, those other inmates you visit with, they're APPU. He goes, "What's APPU?" He didn't even know. And I said, Assessment Preparation Program Unit. That unit is designed for people that, like yourself, that are high profile inmates. I mean, you would qualify for that unit. He goes, "You think so? My lawyer never said anything about that unit. I didn't know about it." I go, "Well, you should ask him." A week later, he was in APPU. His lawyer did his thing, I guess. And a week later, he was there. Well, as soon as he got there, of course, then I saw him a lot more. So I got to see him quite often. And, that's how that happened. I don't think it was the facility didn't really want him in APPU. I don't know that they cared either way, that he was or he wasn't, because he was still being protected. He wasn't like in general population like a lot of people may think. I mean, he was protected from the first day, even at Rikers, I'm sure. He was protected from the first day he went to prison until the last day he left. Not because he wanted it. I'm sure he would have been fine. He would have said, "Give me population," for sure. But because nobody wanted the liability. Nobody wanted to be responsible if anything happened to him. There is a lot of jealousy in prison. There's a lot of domination where somebody wants to take you off your pedestal, so to speak. Like if they thought he was at the top of his game, they might want to help somebody else that wanted to take him down a notch or do something to him, or they might want to be his friend and somebody might get jealous. There's a million reasons why they wouldn't want him in population. It would create chaos. You know what I'm saying? So that's why they didn't want him there. But But as far as getting to APPU, that's how he ended up in APPU.
Hey, Chris, hold up the book. Tupac Behind Bars. It's a great book. I just wanted you to hold it up. Like I said, it's a great read. I was very much informed about a lot of things that I didn't know. I just wanted the audience to get a snapshot of the book cover. Definitely.
I appreciate
Michael,
that. Thank you.
Yeah, Michael Christopher, you got to check it out. But moving on, when Tupac talked about karma and life being a circle, did you get the sense he believed his prison time was cosmic payback or part of a divine setup?
I think he probably thought it was both, because he believed things, what goes around comes around. I guess that's a saying we all know, but he actually believed it. Like, he believed, whatever you throw out into the universe, be careful because it's going to come back. At some point in your life, what you do gets returned to you. You know what I mean? So if you do good, you hope somebody does good for you. If you do bad to somebody, the chances are at some point someone else, it may not be the same person, something's going to happen bad to you. We had discussions about things like that, of that nature. And yeah, he kind of called it like a boomerang effect. You throw it out and it comes back, at some point. And I think that, he believed in God. I don't know, some people know it. People that know him know that he was not that he was overly religious, but he believed in God. He said his prayers like I do too. A lot of people do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he had his own relationship, and I think that, he felt like he would have been the first person to tell me, he was no angel. He's like, Mr. C, I wasn't an angel. I'm not going to lie. I'm not a bad person. I wasn't an angel. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I get it. Who is, right? Everybody makes mistakes in life. And he was still young. He was 23. He was just living life. He's just starting. He had a lot more mistakes that I'm sure he was going to make along the way. We all do. Hopefully you learn from it and you don't make the same mistake twice. But yeah, I think during one of our conversations, he had mentioned like, I think it was Milton, Lost Paradise. He had read a lot of books, and he was reading these books, and he was taking pieces out of them, and basically the book had talked about Adam and Eve, and God had kicked Adam out for eating the apple and whatever, and he was quoting something along those lines, where like, okay, so maybe this is my karma, right? I ended up here. I don't want to be here, but maybe I'm being taught some kind of lesson. And, we talked about it a little bit, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, maybe. You know what I mean? Your guess is as good as mine. And he goes, well, I'm kind of in hell already, basically talking about prison as being his own personal hell. And that basically he had to deal with it himself because nobody else could. People couldn't relate to it being in prison because unless you've been in prison, you don't understand prison. And I think he was right about that. I was never an inmate, but I was part of the prison system. And I think officers, they endure their own hell. It's not easy to be an officer either. And it's definitely not easy to be an inmate. Nobody wants to be an inmate. And a lot of people don't want to be an officer. It's not easy for either side. It's not something that people relish, but it's something they endure, and for different reasons. And he was there. He said not through his own fault. For what he was convicted of, he felt that he wasn't. But nonetheless, the judge put him there, and there he was. So he just felt like a karma had gotten him for something else, along those lines.
So if it wasn't for what he actually was in there for, it was something that he had done along the way in his life somewhere, some along the lines.
Yeah, I think he alluded to that. He would claim the fifth. Sometime we'd be joking around, and I say, tell me more, and he'd say, oh man, I got to claim the fifth. I say the fifth. He goes, yeah, I'm not going to incriminate myself. He said, I'm just saying I'm not an angel. And he would leave it at that. So he goes, you know what I mean? And I said, yeah, I got you. I feel you. So, but it was cool.
You quoted Tupac saying, "When all my shit comes back to me, I'm in trouble." Did you interpret that as prophecy, or maybe even Tupac foreshadowing his own death?
Yeah, I think it was probably a little of both. I mean, Tupac believed in precognition. We had spoke about it at length several times. And, it's a very good possibility that he may have dreamt it or seen it somehow or felt it. Um, he had expressed to me that he had an aunt that lived in, I believe it was North Carolina or South. I'm not quite sure. It was one of the Carolinas. They used to read tea leaves, and she had told him something. He didn't elaborate totally. He just said she saw something that wasn't good in his future, that was dark. And when he had said that to me, I was like, wow. And he goes, yeah. And he believed all that, and I do too. Uh, I believe that sometimes you may know the future, and even though you can't change it, that you still have a glimpse of it, and that he may have had the glimpse and knew, and that's probably why he worked so hard doing what he did, trying to fit everything in, that kind of thing. And but yeah, I mean, he was able to interpret things like that, dreams or feelings. Some people are better at it than others, I think. Um, Sometimes you can have tarot card reads or whatever. Depends on what your belief system is. Um, I've had them read and had them come true, and I think we had discussed things like that together. And he said, yeah, he believed it too. Um, that in some way, the future is already written, and that we're just living it out. Uh, that we can't change it, but yeah, I believe that he probably knew that he wasn't going to live to be old. I think um, that would be my impression of our conversations.
You also described that Tupac said that everything happens in threes: birth, life, death. Do you think Tupac subconsciously knew that his third act would end violently?
Yeah, I do. Um, basic, basically, yeah, everything does happen in threes. And even there's an old saying, when someone passes away, that it's usually in threes. So you don't usually lose one person. It's a lot of times it's three people, and there's a lot of basis for that. Tupac and I would talk about things like that, or the Egyptians like the word, the number three, numerology, things like that. And yeah, I mean, it is what it is, right? Uh, you can't explain it, and I don't think he could. I can't, but yeah, you can't deny it either. That karma, things happening in threes, they're all kind of interconnected in some way.
You also wrote in the book that Tupac joked about being cremated and having his ashes rolled in a blunt. Do you think he was joking or foreshadowing what really happened, because he actually rapped about it in a song?
I It was funny when he said that because it kind of took me off guard. It was funny. He just said, yeah, he said he didn't care about after he was dead what they did to him because he wanted to be burnt. And then he said he wanted his ashes, uh, yeah, basically put into a blunt and have his homeboys smoke them up. And I was like, "Are you for real?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm serious, man." He was dead serious. And and I guess from what I've read that may have happened. I'm not sure, but it wouldn't surprise me because anybody that knew Pac if they respected his wishes, I think they would have done it. I mean, I would have. You know what I'm saying? If given the circumstances and stuff, he may have had a feeling that that's where he was headed. We did talk about death. We talked about life too. Why we're here, things like that. I think things that have been asked forever since the beginning of man, right? Why are we here? What are we doing here? And but we all know that we're only here for a limited time, each of us, not just Tupac, but anybody. So it's all what you do while you're here. And I think that he amplified it. You know what I'm saying? He just took every minute, did what he could. I think that anytime he wrote about stuff, it was something in his life experience. So I'm guessing that he probably did see it or foreshadow it or knew it was coming or something along those lines.
You also described Afeni Shakur arguing with Tupac over money and choices. Do you think Tupac resented his mother by that point, or was it guilt disguised as rebellion?
I think they had a complicated relationship. I never personally got to meet his mom, but I knew the officer that had the visiting room during the week. We're close friends, and we spoke at length about it. And because I wasn't there when he spoke to his mom, the officer that was, I believe him to be truthful. He pretty much summed it up as it was, I don't know, a love-hate relationship, but it was complicated. They would argue, and again, Tupac and his mom would be close to the desk because it's same as when I was on. That officer would be right in close proximity. He kind of summed it up as that she wanted more for him than she had, And basically, she had gone to jail. She didn't want him to go to jail. She was mad that he went to jail. She didn't want him there, and it was something that I guess she had talked to him about or warned him about. I don't know, but I knew she wasn't happy that he was there, and that she wanted him to use his brain and to to be successful, I guess, right? She wanted more for him than she had, I guess. But every parent really hopes for their kid, I suppose. And I suppose at 23, he had a lot of growing pains. So I'm sure they had disagreements like most kids do with their parents at some point in their lives, finding themselves, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I guess she came a couple times. Not a lot. I don't know what the circumstances were. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she was busy. I don't know. But I'm sure he loved her, though. That much I'm sure of. It was complicated, but that's between him and her. So
You also wrote that the government underestimated charging Tupac with a sex crime because it couldn't silence him. In your opinion, was the conviction part of a larger takedown?
I mean, it's possible. I'm not saying that it is. I'm not saying that it isn't. I have I've met other inmates that were accused of crimes of a sexual nature that were decorated veterans, had done things for the country and whatever. They had expressed to me that they had knowledge of things that the government had done, and that in their opinion, their conviction was based on silencing them. And Tupac and I had talked about it, and basically it was a possibility. He was saying that he felt like, the government wasn't on his side, that they didn't want him to become powerful. You know what I mean? Because a lot of people listened to him, even though he was a young guy. He had a lot of following, even more so now. But back then, even for the time, he had a lot of people that listened to whatever he said. And I'm sure anytime you have a situation like that, I think the government looks at you. I'm sure. Uh, to what degree, I don't know. I believe that during the sentencing, it had a part to play. I believe that because he said everybody else that was involved in his conviction basically got off. They didn't do any time. Only him. And, he wasn't happy about it. But who would be, right? I mean, I wouldn't. So I get it. He explained it to me, and I listened. Sometimes that's all people want is somebody to listen. And, he told me what happened and everything in his words. So could it be something like that? It could be. It's not out of the realm of possibility, no.
When Tupac told you, I didn't sexually assault her, but I touched her, did you feel conflicted as a correctional officer or as a man hearing another man's justification?
Well, probably I felt like what he told me, I believe that he was telling me his truth. You know what I mean? He was telling me what he believed to be true and why he didn't feel like he should be there. He said he had told me the situation where something of that nature had happened in the past previously with that person, and that everything had went okay, and that particular night, that person wanted to be with Tupac. Apparently, that's what he said, and he had agreed, and he was under the impression that it was going to go the same way it had gone previously. And according to Tupac, they were in the room. They went in the bedroom. They did their thing. And then when he was done, he wanted to invite the rest of his friends that were there because he wasn't by himself, but they were separated in a separate room. And she left the room, according to him, and he's kind of stopped her in the next room or whatever with the other people were, and he tried to talk her into doing the same thing with them that he had done. And that she had changed her mind, according to him, that he felt like she was in agreement prior to the event, and that after they had done whatever they did in the bedroom, that she no longer wanted to be there. She wanted to leave. And he told me that what he did was try to convince her to stay. He admitted that. He goes, yeah, I tried to talk her into staying. I told her, well, blah, 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 you know, we've done this, you know how you like it, or this or that. And he gave her whatever explanation to try to talk her into it. And she didn't want to have it. She didn't want to hear it, he said. And he said he did touch her on the butt or whatever. But he said, this is the same girl I was just in the bedroom with. So he goes, I did it, but I didn't think much of it. And he said one of the reasons they convicted him, according to him, was that because he had touched her while he was trying to convince her. What I remember him telling me is that she ran out of the room, bolted out of the room, went down the hallway. Somebody stopped her. She was crying. She was upset or whatever, and asked her what happened. And apparently that's how the whole thing transpired, according to him. May not be exact, but that pretty much paraphrases what he told me. And he said that he compared it to like coercion. Like he said, if somebody's on a building and they say, I'm going to jump, and you tell them, go ahead, jump, and they do it, then you're complicit because, you're part of the act. That's how he compared it. And I said, oh, okay. And he goes, so yeah, I tried to talk her into doing it. I did. But he goes, all my stuff was legit. She was willing participant and whatever we did to consenting adults. Basically that's what he was saying. And I said, okay, I get that. He goes, Mr. C, it's not like I have to beg women to be with me. I am who I am, Tupac Shakur. And I go, I get it. We laughed. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I didn't do it. I tried to talk her into it. I did, but no, I don't deserve this. And I felt for him. I'm like, okay. As a man, I felt, all right. He was owning his part of it, but he didn't like the outcome. He didn't like that the other people that were involved, everybody got to go home except for him. He had to go to jail, and he was the one that was with a willing participant. You know what I mean? It wasn't, he just felt like he had been slighted by the system. Like, because he had had prior run-ins with the law and whatever previous to this, he felt like this was their payback. This was their opportunity to get him for something else, even though this was kind of flimsy at best. That, if he hadn't have been the person that he was, he said he probably would have got a slap on the wrist, probation, whatever. They would have worked it out. I mean, touching her on the buttocks, yeah, it's wrong. It's illegal. You can't do it. He said, yeah, okay, I didn't know, because he said that he had already touched her and she was okay with it. But at that point, apparently she wasn't. So yeah, I felt for him, just as a person and as an officer. I've had other inmates tell me that they're innocent of crimes they didn't commit. Most of the time, when you ask an inmate, they'll tell you they didn't commit the crime anyway. But occasionally, there are some that haven't committed a crime or have been convicted of a crime they didn't commit. And I've seen that come to fruition too. So it's, it is what it is. I mean, things like that happens. Mistakes happen. People get convicted when they shouldn't be. You hope the system is good. It's the only one we have. But, mistakes sometimes are made. I'm not saying it was a mistake that he went to jail or didn't go to jail. I'm not the judge. But I'm just saying what he told me. He felt like he was slighted on the deal.
Keisha Morris, you said that you were there when they got married. What was that like? You also said she seemed devoted, but often jealous and frustrated. Did you sense Tupac ever truly loved her, or was she another form of an emotional survival tool for him while he was incarcerated?
That's a difficult question. Yeah, I think he loved her. He certainly talked about her a lot. I don't know if it was love or infatuation, but he was 23. You know what I'm saying? So maybe he thought it was love, because when he talked to her, or he talked to me about her, it seemed like love. But at 23, you can be in love today, and 6 months from now, maybe not. But he was definitely happy when she was there, and she always came, man. She always came. She came to visit him religiously all the time, and he was always happy when they left. There were a few occasions, and I remember one time this girl came from Syracuse and came to visit him. And the front gate had called me and said, "Hey, there's a visit for Tupac." And I go, "Oh, is it Keisha?" And they said, "No, this person's never visited before." "Oh," I said. They go, "Do you want us to send her up?" I said, "Well, let me check. I'll check with the block," because I was already in the visiting room. So I said, "Let me check with the block and ask Tupac if he wants to visit her." I said, "Who is it?" I guess the girl said she was a fan. So I called the block and I said, "Hey, I go down and ask Tupac if he wants to visit some girl from Syracuse is here, a fan of his, wants to know if she could visit him. And Tupac, being Tupac, said, sure, yeah, I'll visit her. So they sent him down, and she came in, and she's a pretty girl. She was endowed pretty good in the chest area, and Tupac seemed to be a little enamored by it. When she walked in, he's like, "Oh my God!" And he he used to do it. He would take his hand and he would bite it, and he'd bite it, and he'd look at her and go, "Oh my God!" And he would just giggle, and I knew what he meant. I knew where he was looking, where his eyes were, and she came over and sat down, and she was friendly to him, and they were talking back and forth. She'd been there, I don't know, a little while, half hour maybe. And I get another call that Keisha's up front, wants to come up. I said, send her up. So, because I knew Tupac wanted to see her, so it's like, okay. So she came in and sat down, and they were sitting in front of me, and Tupac just could not take his eyes off her breasts. He just kept looking down there, and Keisha noticed his eyes going down instead of up at her face, and you could see she was getting annoyed with him, and she she gave him an elbow and told him to knock it off, and he's like, "Damn girl, what are you doing?" And she was not happy with the situation. I thought it was kind of funny. Usually I wouldn't have allowed a visitor to hit an inmate or an inmate to hit a visitor, vice versa. No kind of physical contact in that type of way. But because of what was happening, and I knew what was happening, and I thought it was kind of humorous, it was funny. I felt kind of like he deserved it, and he looked at me and he gave me one of those looks like, you got me, okay. But that was him. I mean, that's just the way he was. Like the kid with his hand in the cookie jar. It's like, oh, you got me. All right. But that was just one of the times that I remember other females visiting him. He did have other females that visited him, but not so much that she was jealous. But Tupac had told me a lot of women were writing him while he was incarcerated, and he was, of course, I think he answered them all. I'm not sure, but he sounded like when people wrote him, he wrote them back. He loved his fans and things like that. You could tell they meant a lot to him. So I'm sure that had to be a conflict for Keisha. But she was good. She seemed devoted to him. I don't know what the circumstances were, why they broke up. He didn't elaborate to me, and I didn't ask. It wasn't my place. And I figured if he wanted to tell me, he would have, but he didn't. So I just left it alone.
You also wrote that after Tupac got married to Keisha Morris, that he never got approved for conjugal visits. And that was one of the things that he thought that he'd get approved for. Do you think that denial fed his frustration and sexual tension that he masked with jokes?
Yeah, I think that was part of it. I think that, and I'm just speculating, I think that's probably why he married her so soon. I mean, I think if he had been in the streets, maybe it wouldn't have been so rushed. He may have still asked her to marry him. I don't know. But I think it may have been later on in the relationship. I think he felt like if I marry her, I'll get the trailer visit. And he was excited about that. He told me that himself.
So hold on. So the trailer visit, what's that? Explain that.
A trailer visit when you're married, if you have 90 days of no infractions. I had talked about this previously, where if an inmate misbehaves, they have what they call a misbehavior report, and it's an infraction basically. They go to a tier hearing, and there's like a judge basically that gives them like a punishment, like no recreation for so many days, or loss of packages for so many days. Something to instill in them to follow the rules, a deterrent. So if you do 90 days without getting any of these infractions and no misbehavior reports, you can apply for a trailer visit. And I'm assuming that he applied for it but didn't get it. Because they can deny you for whatever reason. I'm sure they must have given him a reason, but he didn't share it with me what it was. All I know is that he never got it. And I'm sure that probably, I would think, because he was so excited about getting it and then he didn't get it, that it probably was a part of, maybe the end, or at least some part of it.
And you also described that Keisha Moore stopped coming to see Tupac after a certain time, and another female started to come see him after that.
Yeah, girl named Desiree. Yep. She would come and see him on the regular after Keisha no longer came. Yeah, she she didn't take any crap, you know. The visitors weren't supposed to ask Tupac for anything. And if they did, then we would have to warn them. Like myself, I would have to go over and tell them, you're not allowed to do that. And if you continue to do that, they can terminate the visit. Which, if you're an inmate and your people came all the way from New York City, or they came from Buffalo or wherever it is, they didn't want to terminate your visit. So most people were on their best behavior in the visiting room, usually. And what would happen was he would get up to go to the bathroom, which is allowed. He would go, leave the desk or the table that they were sitting at, and somebody would lean over to ask her basically to get them an autograph or whatever. And I could see the person leaning across to her, and I could see her, rolling up her sleeve, and I believe it was like a tattoo or something that said, go ask Tupac, she was like, no, I'm not, I don't want any part of this. And basically shut him down. They stopped asking her. And I was like, ordinarily I would have said something about the interaction, but I figured she could handle herself. She didn't need my help. I liked her. She was good with Tupac. Tupac seemed happy. It was cool.
You also described Tupac bragging about buying 2 BMWs while locked up. Did that strike you as insecurity or defiance against the system that he felt like was trying to break him, that he still had that financial power?
I don't know. I mean, I think in a way it was. I think he was probably trying to convince himself that they hadn't broken him. You know what I mean? No matter how much money he was putting out, he was still able to. Not only did he buy her a black BMW and himself one, according to him, that's what he told me, but he used to give her $500 a day, according to him, to spend.
And who would? So we understand
Keisha.
Who was he giving?
He was giving it to Keisha.
Keisha, okay.
This is during the time that he was married, when he bought the BMWs. He bought a BMW for Keisha and one for himself. And he said, I give her $500 a day for spending because she likes to spend. And he said she loves to go shopping. So I giggled about that. And he goes, women, they love to shop. And I'm like, yep. And he thought, I thought it was funny too. He thought it was funny. But yeah, she always came up on the visits with this girl named Rachel, who was the girlfriend of another inmate in the unit with Tupac. So whenever Tupac would get a visit, this other inmate, Shannon Siegel, would get a visit. And his girlfriend and Keisha Moore used to carpool together from the city, and they were very tight. Not only were the two girls seemed to be very tight, but Tupac and this guy Shannon Siegel, to my knowledge, was the only guy he was tight with in the unit. I mean, he spoke to everybody. He was cordial. People would ask him questions or maybe crack a joke, but he had no kind of connection that I saw other than this kid. This kid, Siegel, and him, they were tight. And, the kid was okay. He was a white kid, and it was like not something you'd expect because his crime was against a black kid in the city, and he was convicted of a crime. And Tupac and him hit it off. The kid told him he did it and explained why he did it. It wasn't exactly the way they had portrayed it. They had portrayed it as a racial crime. And the white kid told me, look, it wasn't racial at all. I knew the kid. He went to the same school as me. He was a few years older. I guess they were at a party. They had words at the party, and I guess the kid left, went home. Him and his friends got these stickball bats or whatever. Went back and they beat the guy with the bats, which is inexcusable in itself, irregardless of what color the two kids were. And the kid was part of it, and he got convicted for doing it. The poor kid that he beat was a star athlete, and it really ruined the kid's life. Had messed him up. He almost took his life by hitting him with the bat in the head. The kid was in a coma, I guess, for quite a while, and it was touch and go. They didn't know if the kid was going to survive. It was bad. It was so bad that you would have thought Tupac would wanted nothing to do with this kid, because this kid it was a high profile crime. Al Sharpton had gotten involved. They had tried to bring it to the media, and it wasn't good. But when I talked to the kid, he owned it and said, yeah, he did it. He was a young kid. Again, he was 20 years old. He was a kid. He made a huge mistake, not a little one, but a huge one. He owned it. And he just, he was sincere in what he said. At least it appeared it to me. I liked the kid. And I think Tupac really liked the kid. And whatever Shannon told him, Tupac either believed it or accepted it because they were tight. And whenever I saw them, they're always together. They would be walking together or talking together or on break together. On the visit, on the way back, walking, he always was with Tupac and I, and all three of us would be talking and walking. There are other inmates all ahead of us, but we were at the end of the line talking, and he was always participating with us. And I could tell that they had a really strong bond. And later on, when Tupac got out and stuff, I guess Shannon was still communicating with Tupac. I'm not sure how. He just said that he was. So he had continued the bond. And this kid, Shannon, told me that he was in part responsible for getting Tupac out of prison. That when Tupac got convicted, his lawyers were unable to beat the charges, obviously. He went to jail. But he had put in an appeal, and the appeal wasn't going anywhere. He was in jail almost 8 months, and nothing was happening with the appeal. And because of his relationship with Shannon, sometime during the summer, when they had gotten close, Shannon told me, I just hooked up Tupac with my lawyer. And I said, who's your lawyer? And he said, Dershowitz. And he goes, O.J. Simpson and this and that. And I said, yeah, I know. Dershowitz, okay. And but Tupac had already told me that Johnny Cochran was one of his lawyers. And he had said the same thing. O.J. Simpson, Johnny Cochran. I was like, yeah, I know who he is. And he's like, yeah, he's my lawyer. And I'm like, no kidding. He goes, yep. But apparently Cochran couldn't do anything for him, or didn't. And I don't know who his other lawyers were. I'm sure he had more. But they weren't getting anywhere. This guy, Dershowitz, as far as I know, I'm not positive, but according to Siegel, which I believe, said that Dershowitz was behind getting him the new appeal because it was incorrectly submitted. It's inside the book. It explains all the legal jargon of out of the law book, so you can look it up from the citing of the law book, and it shows where the first one wasn't properly entertained, his first appeal, but the second one was. So I'm guessing that this guy Dershowitz did it properly and helped him achieve getting the bail set. And I think that's where Suge came in with the money, because getting it set wasn't enough to get him out, because he still needed, like, I think 1.4 million was the bail, if I remember correct. And he still needed somebody to supply the money. And basically, I think that's when he decided, that death row would be the way to go, because they were offering him money, but they wanted stuff in return. Of course, everybody does, right?
Speaking of Suge Knight, when Tupac met with Suge Knight and David Kenner at Clinton, you said you felt like Suge hated you or thought that you were beneath him. Did you see the same contempt toward Tupac, or did he view Tupac as a cool person?
Oh,
Him
no.
coming to visit Tupac for the first time at Clinton.
No, it was the opposite. When he brought Suge over to me, he actually Suge Knight and Dave Kenner had to report to the desk to me before they sat down. I have to tell them where to sit, and then usually I tell them to sit down wherever, and Tupac would be there, but Tupac was already there with Desiree, I believe, sitting at the table. So they came up to the desk, and Tupac got out of his chair and came over to the desk and introduced Suge to me. That's what I referred to in the book. And Suge Knight just looked me up and down because he didn't really want to deal with me. It looked like, I'm here in prison, but you're an officer and I'm a celebrity, and he just it felt like he was looking down on me. Like, I don't know, maybe just because he didn't like law enforcement. I don't know if it was because I was white. I don't know what it was. I couldn't tell you, but all I could tell you was that it was that look of disdain, like I don't like you. I don't care who you are. That kind of thing. And Tupac wanted to introduce him to me, and he's like, "Yo, Mr. C, this is Suge Knight. This is Death Row Records." And he went on and was telling me about the record company or whatever. And I said, like, yeah, I know who he is. I've seen him a couple times, MTV or whatever. He was on TV quite a bit at that time. And he wanted Suge to shake my hand. And Suge, you could tell Suge did not want to shake my hand. He didn't want, it was like, he didn't want anything to do with me. But at least that's how I perceived it. And Tupac goes, "Go ahead, come on, shake his hand. He's a good man. Shake his hand." And you could see Suge kind of give him that look. And Tupac's like, basically telling him, "I want you to shake this man's hand." And Suge conceded. He did. He shook my hand. But, man, when he grabbed my hand, holy crap. Suge's a big dude. I mean, I've seen big guys in correctional settings, I've seen thousands. Suge is a big man. He was then. I mean, his shoulders were wide, big, and tall. And when he grabbed my hand, holy crap. He shook it. But he, shook it. You know how when you give somebody a firm handshake? This was beyond firm. This was like, okay, I'll do what you said, but you want a handshake? I'll give you a handshake. And, man, he squeezed it. Holy crap. It hurt. He squeezed it like a vice. And Tupac's like, yeah. Because he liked the idea that, I think he liked the idea that Suge was doing what he asked him to do. He was getting him to do something he didn't want to do. And I think Tupac liked that. You know what I mean? It was like, yeah. But later on, after that particular day, he talked highly of Suge. He liked him. I mean, it appeared to me that he trusted him. Why or what, the specifics, I don't know. But when I told him to be careful when he got out and whatnot, I had different conversations with him. He always reiterated, "Don't worry, Suge's got my back. You know, he's going to take care of me. He's got security, and we use walkie-talkies, and we use bulletproof vests." And Tupac, he felt safe. Like, not invincible, but I think he felt comfortable enough that he felt like Suge was going to take care of him. Now, at some point, you know, I'm sure that may have changed, at the appearance that it may have later. But at that point, when I met him and I knew Pac inside prison, he liked them. I mean, they seemed to have like a friend relationship, like that was his buddy. You know, they didn't seem like they were just business associates. They seemed more than that, at least to me.
When Tupac's father, Billy Garland, visited Clinton, you said Pac's eyes filled with tears. Did that meeting seem like healing or another identity crisis for him?
No, I think it was healing. I think that was everything he ever wanted. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that's what he had always wanted. He wanted a father. And when Billy Garland presented himself, I think he fulfilled that for him. Like, he felt like he belonged, like he was a part of something. You know what I mean? Like, that's my dad. He was pretty proud. I mean, at least that's the impression he gave me, and it was emotional, not just for him, but for me, because I felt it, like that empathy. Like, you know what I'm saying? It was like I could feel him uh, not only relating to his father, but he also mentioned to me that I look like him, don't I? And I said, yeah, I guess you do. And he did. I mean, because he didn't shave his head bald at that time in the prison. He was letting it grow out a little bit. And he would let the barbers like trim it and stuff, but I don't think he trusted them enough to use like a razor. Because you're allowed to have like a disposable razor. But I don't think he was trusting anybody to shave it. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, he did. He looked like his dad. I mean, he was happy that day. He really was. I was happy for him. So
That's interesting because a lot of people have said of so many things about the relationship between Billy Garland and Tupac, and that was one of the. We also interviewed him here on the Art of Dialogue, and he spoke about that and talked about that. That was the first time they really actually got a chance to talk to Tupac when he visited him at Clinton. So you describing that is very informative. I appreciate that.
yeah, you're welcome.
There was also a situation with Jasmine Guy, and she came in to visit Tupac, and they took a photo, and actually the sergeant took the photo and kept the photo. Can you elaborate on that?
No, it wasn't the sergeant. It was an officer. When Jasmine came to visit, they are allowed to go and take these photos, JC Photos they call it. It's an organization that they could take these Polaroid pictures, and then the visitors can take them home, but the inmate pays for them, or he can keep them himself. And you're allowed so many to buy so many. I think it was like 5. There was a limit on it. And so they went in the room, and I usually would stay in the visiting room because I was the first officer. But because somebody had escorted, they said, "Hey, I have to take her down to the visiting room. She has to go down where the photos are taken, but somebody has to take Shakur." And he goes, "I don't really want to do it." I said, "I'll do it." And he goes, "Oh, all right, I'll watch the visiting room for you." So we switched. So the officer stayed in the visiting room, and I went. And Tupac was in the room, and Jasmine Guy was in the room, and there's an officer assigned in that room. with an inmate, and the inmate's job is to take the photographs, and the officer's job is to, monitor that. So I was standing in the corner. They took pictures of Jasmine and Tupac together, and he was pretty happy. I mean, he really liked Jasmine. She was a sweetheart, and you could tell that his like for her or love for her as a friend or whatever the relationship was, it was tight. It was close. And they took the pictures. And after the pictures, I don't know if you ever seen the old Polaroids. Not everybody's old enough to remember these. I think they made a comeback, but you would shake the Polaroid to dry it. And the inmate would take the picture and set it down. He'd dry it, set it down, then do another and another. And when he got to the last one, the officer sitting next to the guy that was taking the photographs said, "Let me see that." And so the inmate says, "Here." So of course the inmate's going to do what he's told. So he hands it to the officer, and the officer just shook it a few more times and stuffed it in his pocket. And Tupac's like, "Whoa, what's up? That's my picture." And he's like, "No, it's mine now." Something to that effect. And Tupac goes, "Well, at least let me take another one." And he says, "No, step off. It's time for you to go." So we had to leave. But I wasn't going to argue with the officer because it wasn't going to get us anywhere. And it was just going to create a whole nother chaos for him, too. You know what I mean? I didn't want Tupac to have more problems with the officers or anything. So we didn't say anything. We went back, and I thought that was the end of it. But I'm guessing that inmate that took the photographs must have said something to another officer, not that one, or a sergeant, at what had happened. And he said the officer took it. So because at that time at Clinton, they knew that I had brought him in there for that photograph, and they knew that I had a good rapport with him, they thought I took the photo. So a sergeant was assigned to an investigation. They investigate things like this. Any kind of allegations, they'll investigate. So the sergeant called me in and said, "Hey, I heard you took a picture from Tupac Shakur." I go, "No." And he says, "Oh, yeah. Somebody told me that you did. They saw it. They didn't see me take it. I didn't take anything." And they go, "Yes, you did." And he kept arguing with me. And I'm like, "I'm telling you, I didn't." And he's like, "Well, if we find out that you did, you're going to be in a lot of trouble." I said, "Well, you can ask anybody you want. I didn't do it." Okay. So later on, apparently they called Tupac down to be interviewed. Now he tells me this later. He says, "Yeah, they asked me. They brought me in the room." And the sergeant's like, "I know that, Mr. Christopher, took that picture, and officer or whatever, And he says, "We know that he took that picture, and all you got to do is tell us, and we'll discipline him. We'll take care of it." And he's like, "Well, what are you talking about?" He's like, "Yeah, he grabbed it, right? Took that picture, put it in his pocket or whatever." And Tupac's like, "No, that never happened." It's like, "What do you mean?" "Yes, it did." And Tupac's like, "No, it didn't." And then the sergeant was getting, talking back and forth, and it was getting a little heated. And then Tupac, according to him, I wasn't there, but Tupac said, "I got a little upset with him." I said, why are you always messing with the officer that treats me like a human with respect, and the guys that treat me like garbage or crap, you don't say anything to those guys." And then the sergeant got a little perturbed with him, and he was like, "Get him out of here." Told the officer to take him out. And Tupac was just like, psh. And he told me, he says, "Yeah, man." He says, I didn't like the way he was talking to me." And he goes, "And especially, I didn't like the way he was talking about you." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that." But I said, "I didn't do anything, so it really didn't matter, But I appreciate you saying that because I wasn't worried about it anyway." And so that explains that portion of it.
When Tupac mocked Stretch, his former buddy, and Biggie, calling Biggie a fat F word, if you will, did that anger seem performative, or was it deep betrayal still eating Tupac up after he was shot at Quad?
Well, it appeared to me that he was really upset with Stretch. I mean, really upset. And he was really upset with Christopher Wallace or Big Papa or whatever. Yeah, he was, he was mad. He was not happy. He, the way he described it to me was that he felt betrayed, that he had been sold out, basically, that he was set up and that those guys were complicit in some way. At least that's what he thought. He felt that way. You know, he thought that that they not necessarily did it themselves, but what he described to me was that sometimes if you have a beef with somebody, you hire what they call a gangbanger to take care of your business for you, and that those people will conduct business on their behalf. And he basically said without saying that he felt that in some way they had contributed to him getting shot, or that they, at least they were aware of it, that he was going to be shot. And he was not happy about it at all. I pretty much told him to leave it alone, you know, not to go there because it wasn't going to turn out well. And again, that's when he reiterated to me about Suge. Don't worry, everything's cool. I got this. I ain't gonna mess with it, and even I'm not afraid of these guys, and he doesn't. Don't worry, I'll be protected. Sugar's got my back. Blah blah blah. Uh, he didn't seem concerned about it, but he was angry about it. So that much I know.
You also described, and I think this was kind of a full circle moment. You described the officer, and you said they ran in twos usually. The officer that called Tupac the N word later on went to his cell and asked him for an autograph for his wife. Can you elaborate on that?
I can elaborate what Tupac told me happened. Obviously, I wasn't there, but according to Tupac, that later on, I don't know if it may not have been the same day, but it was shortly after he had arrived. And Tupac said he recognized the guy that had called him the N word when he first arrived come down to his cell, and he had another guy with him. And he had said to him, "Hey, let me see your ID." So Tupac gave it to him because anytime an officer asks an inmate to produce their ID is identification, has a picture of them and their DIN number and tells who they are so that you can ID them. So anytime an officer asked you, you're supposed to give it to him. So he did. He gave it to him. And while the guy has it, he says, "Hey, by the way, my wife's a big fan." Oh, Tupac said something like, "Oh, cool, yeah, thank you," or whatever. And he says a little bit of small talk, and then the guy goes, "Would you mind giving me an autograph for her?" And Tupac says, "Sure, no problem." So Tupac says that he signed it because the guy had called him poor and dumb before he said the N-word. That when Tupac signed whatever it was he signed, I don't know if it was a piece of paper, whatever he signed it from the richest, smartest N-word you'll ever meet. Peace, Tupac Shakur. And when he told me that, the only thing I could think of was, that's class, man. Because he took a bad thing and he turned it around. You know what I mean? And he didn't let it affect him. He goes, "Yeah, I know how you guys are up here," because he was telling me how it had went down, but he was also comparing it to like the people up north were like the guys down south, and the dueling banjos, and from the from the movie, So he was making fun of that, and it was funny, He started going, and he goes, "I know how you guys are, blah blah blah," and I'm like, "Yeah, all right," So I knew that he wasn't directing it at me, but he was saying you guys, but he didn't mean it in an offensive way. It was more like humor, because I'm sure it must have bothered him what that guy had said to him, and then putting him in that position where he had to be nice to him. But and the thing was, I mean, he never turned him in for it. He never reported it. He could have, but to me, that said something about Tupac more than about the officer that did it. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though that guy wore the same shirt as me, I had more respect for what Tupac did than for what that guy did. And, that's what I remember him telling me. Like I said, I wasn't there, but that's exactly what he told me, and I believe him.
You also mentioned a story about John Gotti that Tupac told you. I had never heard this story before. Like I said, the book is very, very interesting. It's a lot of other stuff in there that we probably won't be able to get into. So like I said, I do recommend people go check it out. This is a firsthand account with Tupac. Like I said, Michael Christopher, former CEO of Clinton Correctional Facility. And the story about John Gotti was interesting to me. Can you expound on that?
Yeah. Tupac had told me that back in the early 90s, I guess, because John Gotti I think he went to prison in 92. And Tupac was up and coming around 91 or so, I guess, from what I gather. Because after he had told me what happened, I kind of looked it up a little bit to try to see, how can this be true. But what he told me was that one night he was out, and that these two big white guys, I guess when he says big, he means like big bodyguards or whatever, they had pulled him into the alleyway or something, and they took him and they put a bag over his head or something somehow. So they, and he was fighting him, of course. It's like, what the hell are you doing? What's going on? Blah blah blah. And Tupac wasn't the one to go easy, but these guys were trying to reassure him to calm down, calm down. Our boss wants to meet you. And he's like, who's your boss? And he says, just relax, man. We're not going to hurt you. And he said something to the effect, that they put him in this van, and they were trying to reassure him not to fight, because it was going to be cool that when they got there, they would explain everything. So Tupac goes, man, I almost crapped myself. He says, I didn't know what they were going to do, these guys. I'm black, they're white. I don't know. Because why are they taking me? And he goes, when they get me there, they take me someplace, but he didn't know where, obviously, because he couldn't see. And when they took the bag off his head, he's, according to him, it was some kind of underground nightclub or something where they were gambling and doing stuff, whatever, that I guess they didn't want other people to be a part of. So, yeah, he said that it was John Gotti himself. Those were his words. He goes, the boss, John Gotti. You know him, right? And I go, yeah, of course. I mean, I worked at Sing Sing back in the 80s when in his heyday, and they loved him. They used to shut down Canal and Mulberry Street and have big, like, Italian festivals and stuff. And, he used to pay for it, I guess, from what I was told. And so when he said his name, I'm like, sure, I know him. I said, he used to be here at Clinton too, right? And Pac's like, really? I was like, yeah. He was incarcerated at Clinton Correctional himself, John Gotti was, when he was younger, before he went up the ranks. And yeah, he said that John had some kind of business proposition for him or something. And I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, oh, I can't tell you that. I said, well, you told me the rest of it, but you can't tell me that? And he's like, nope, because I can't do that, man. And I'm like, all right. So he didn't elaborate. He had my interest. I wanted to know, but he was like, nope. Well, that was all he told me, is that for whatever reason, Gotti wanted to meet him. I don't know why. I haven't got a clue. He talked to him about something, and Tupac was kind of proud of it, that that he had talked to him. At least that's what he said, because we were making jokes about it, and he was always, we were always kind of fooling around, kidding around, and you know, he was doing like the Al Capone thing, like Gotti with the comparison and whatever, and he did the machine gun, like my little friend, meet my little friend or whatever, and it was funny because I mean, some of the stuff that Tupac would come up with when we were talking was he would give you like not only say it, but he would like act it, you know, and it was funny, and I was laughing, and we were both laughing. It was pretty funny, but yeah, he wouldn't tell me any more about it, so I haven't got a clue what it meant or what it was about. But that's what he said.
Talking about the bail situation, when Tupac finally found out that he was going to be released on bail and that he had received bail, uh, there was a situation with, I believe, a higher ranking officer, and you guys had a conversation. Tell me what that conversation was about so that the viewers understand.
Okay, well, it was a conversation with the superintendent, and the conversation was taking place in the men's restroom. We were standing by each other in front of an urinal, and kind of a little uncomfortable place to be talking, right? But being cordial, whatever. Good morning, sir. And he said, good morning, Mr. Christopher, or whatever. And so I said, I hear that our famous inmate's going to be going home. He goes, we don't have any famous inmates here. Or I said celebrity or something to that effect, celebrity inmate. And he goes, yeah, we don't have any of those here. All we have is inmates. And I said, oh, and I go, well, how about infamous inmate then? And he goes, well, no inmate goes home on bail. Because I said, I think our guy's going to get bail. And he goes, no, that's not going to happen. He goes, I've been doing this over 30 years, and I've never seen an inmate, once they're convicted in the prison, go home on bail for an appeal. They either are granted it prior to and they stay out until it's finished, but once they're incarcerated, it doesn't happen. And he goes, I go, well, I heard that he has Johnny Cochran and Dershowitz and them working on it. And he goes, I don't care if he has all the dream team working for him. It's not going to happen. He's not going. But a couple weeks later, Tupac was gone. So Tupac had told me prior to this conversation that I'm going home. And I'm like, really? He's like, yep, I'm going home, man. I'm going to be getting out. I said, do you know when? He goes, nope, not exactly, but I know it's going to be soon. I said, all right. So maybe a week or 2 weeks at the most, probably, after he told me he was gone. And I came into work and he was already gone. I was like, when did he go? He's like, yesterday. It was my day off. So I kind of missed his farewell. I had said goodbye to him like, couple days before that, because we had talked about him going home. So, he knew that I was like wishing him well, that I was hoping that things worked out, because just because he was going home on bail didn't mean he was going to beat the charges. It just meant that he had another chance at his appeal. And ultimately, I believe that he was going to have to come back, just prior to dying. The same inmate, Shannon Siegel, had talked to me and said, Tupac sent a message. I said, what's that? He said, see you soon. And I said, see you soon? He goes, that's what he said. See, like a see you soon. And I said, oh. I said, you think he's coming back? Shannon goes, sounds like it. Sounds like maybe he lost the appeal. And I said, oh, man. He goes, yeah, I know. And Siegel would have been happy to see him back, but he was also sad thinking that maybe he had lost the appeal. Because, I mean, Tupac would not have liked the idea of having to go back. There's no doubt in my mind that he wanted to put that behind him. And so, yeah, he was, wasn't good, but that's where it was at.
If you could tell Tupac one thing today, based on everything you've seen, what would it be? Would you still tell him to keep it real or to save himself?
No, I think keep it real, man. Because that was one thing that we always said between each other is that you may not like what I have to say, but if it comes from the heart, keep it real. Because people are always going to disagree with you. Not everybody's going to like you. Not everybody's going to hate you. Hopefully, you got a balance somewhere in there. And you just tell your truth, man. Just tell it like you see it and how you feel it. And some people will feel it and some people won't. But I think that's how he got successful in the first place. Keeping it real. People appreciated that he wasn't selling them a bunch of lies, you know what I'm saying? So that was one of the things that I liked about him. Uh, I've always been the type of person that if I have a friend, I'd rather somebody stab me in the heart than in the back. I want to see it coming. And I think Tupac was the same kind of guy. Is that keep it real. If you don't like me, that's cool. No problem. But don't tell me you like me and then stab me in the back. That's the kind of thing that I think when he and I talked about it, we both agreed that we didn't like people like that. We'd rather have somebody that just told us straight up, I don't like you. That's fine. Don't tell, you know what I'm saying? Be real. And I think I would still tell him to just keep doing what he was doing. I think he would have done great things had he lived. I really do.
I'd like to thank you, man, for giving me your time. I appreciate you for coming on the Art of Dialogue. I think it's a blessing that we finally got to speak to you because, like I said, you've never done any kind of on-camera interview, and this is your first. I appreciate it. Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we end the interview?
No, I mean, I appreciate you having me on, giving me an opportunity to tell some of the interactions between Tupac and I. I respected him, and I believe he respected me, and I just hope people read the book. Uh, Even if they don't buy it, if somebody else has bought it, let them read it. Let somebody else read it, borrow it. I just, you know, I just want to get it out there because there's been things that I have read and seen that I know weren't true. And I just want to give people an opportunity to see what I saw. And hopefully, they do that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
I have one more question. The situation involving Tupac and people saying that Tupac was sexually assaulted while he was in prison. You were there next to Tupac. You would know, as you said, Tupac was basically in the APPU as well as in protective custody for his own safety. Once and for all, can you elaborate on that, whether it's true or not?
I could say that nothing ever happened to Tupac Shakur at Clinton Correctional Facility. He was never raped. I could say that with 100% accuracy that anything that would have happened to him or could have happened to him, I would have known about. That in APPU, it's a very small unit. It's a very protected unit. It's a very watched unit. There's officers have eyes on every one of those inmates all the time, 24/7, 365. I mean, they barely have any privacy at all because their cells, the bars are open. I mean, you walk down the company, you can see them. Anytime they come out of their cells, they're on the company's, there's officers watching them. They don't get let out of the cell unless an officer watches them come out. And in the yard, it's a very small yard for APPU. It's a very segregated area. There's no place out there that they could do it. And if it ever did happen, I can guarantee you there would be an inmate in that unit that would snitch, that would either own it or would want to sell it, capitalize on it, or try to just, disparage him in some way. Excuse me. And that they would definitely tell, and they would want to own it. And especially all these years later, this is 30 years later, somebody would have wanted to sell their story because these guys, I mean, they were incarcerated And sometimes in that setting, it's about money or fame. And there's some inmates that even if they weren't getting paid, they would just want that notoriety to say it was them. Even if they were the person that said they did it, they would want somebody to know. And in that unit, if somebody had done something like that, it would be like holding the winning lottery ticket. They would feel like they had the power and they would have taken control over him, which is the act of a rape is basically control. That's what they say. It's about control. It's not about sex. And they would have taken control of him. They didn't. No one ever did. And it never happened to Clinton. And I can say that 100%. And anything that says otherwise is not true. It's false. That's all I can say about that.
Thank you. I appreciate you once again, Michael Christopher, author of the book Tupac Behind Bars, Clinton Correctional Facility. Recommend that you pick up the book. Thank you for coming on the Art of Dialogue. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, man. Peace.